The smell reached her before the sight. Not smoke, though the fire pit still smoldered. Not cassava, though its starchy sweetness clung to the bricks. This was something else, sharp, coppery, clinging to the throat. Blood. Faint. Old. But real. Joanna hesitated beside the Aguilar's outdoor oven. Morning heat draped the estate in a blanket of silence. Even the cicadas seemed paused, listening. She stooped to sweep ash from under the stone ledge, her fingers skimming against hardened earth and coal grit. Then something soft. She pulled back, blinking. The tip of blue cotton peeked through the gray, almost shy beneath the char. A shirt. Not just any shirt. It had red thread at the hem, uneven, hand-done. She'd seen it every market day on Gabriel, the lanky sharecropper boy who always walked with his back too straight, as if daring the world to try him. The same boy who grinned crooked when he caught her eye. Who helped her carry water once when she'd stumbled. Who hadn't been seen in 2 days. Joanna dropped her broom. She didn't cry out. That instinct had been worn out of her years ago. She simply stood, breath arrested, skin prickling beneath her plain white blouse. Around her, the house remained asleep in its lie of peace, shutters half open, hammocks swaying, chickens scratching in different circles in the dust. The cloth lay there like an accusation. She knelt again. The shirt was stained black at the chest, stiff, stuck to the earth as if the ground itself was unwilling to let go. She didn't touch it, only looked, only felt. There was no need for touch. Her bones already knew. From the church on the hill, the chapel bell rang once. A solitary sound. A summons, maybe, or a warning. She stood slowly, legs unsteady beneath her. In the shade of the mango trees, the Aguilar's dog stirred but did not bark. Nothing did. Even the wind kept still. Inside the kitchen, cutlery clinked faintly. The house was waking. She walked back through the courtyard with the shirt's shape burned behind her eyes. Her feet moved by memory, not will, passing the rose bush her mother once trimmed, past the stone wall where Marcos, the youngest Aguilar boy, hid his stolen marbles. At the back steps she paused. The clay soil clung to her soles. Red and thick. Always clinging. "Joanna," came a sharp voice from inside. Lucas, the eldest. His voice carried the certainty of those never punished. "Where's the coffee?" She pushed open the door, every breath measured. Inside, breakfast unfolded like theater, white linen, fried plantains, overripe papaya, and the Aguilars lounging as though the world had done nothing to them. Senor Aguilar read a newspaper with fingers stained from tobacco. Dona Rosa picked at a mango slice with a silver fork, face powdered and untouched by the morning heat. Lucas sprawled like a prince, lips stained from wine already. Marcos, silent, watched everyone like a sponge. Joanna moved to the stove, poured the coffee, steady hand, blank face, and served each cup in order. They did not thank her. They never did. She was a fixture, like the tiled floor or the iron hooks on the wall. Lucas chuckled suddenly, leaning back in his chair. "You missed the excitement yesterday, Joanna. Dogs found someone in the ravine. Stupid thief. Probably slipped." Senor Aguilar grunted. "They always run to the hills. Like rats." Joanna said nothing. Her hand trembled as she reached for the last cup. She steadied it against the tray's edge. "The police took someone in," Rosa added, wiping her hands as though the subject dirted her skin. "Said he matched the description." Joanna lowered her gaze. Her throat felt thick. Gabriel hadn't been stealing. He'd been wearing that shirt. She left the room without a word. Hours later, after dishes and laundry and sweeping the parlor, Joanna returned to the oven. The day was older now. He pressed like a hand against her back. No one watched. Not here. She crouched and stared at the shirt again. The flies had come now, slow and lazy. She didn't sweat them. With a stick, she prodded the cloth, lifting it just enough to reveal the gash torn through its middle. A knife wound. Sloppy. Furious. She dug a small trench in the ashes and pushed the shirt into it. Not too deep, but deep enough to hide. She covered it, her fingers gray with soot, then pressed her palms flat against the warm earth as if sealing a grave. Then she whispered. Not a prayer. Not in Portuguese. One word, low, from the language her mother used when no one else could hear. Do it. She stood, brushed the dust from her knees. From the window above, a curtain moved. Joanna looked up. A shadow quick, gone. Watching? She turned away. The earth remembered. The shirt was buried, but nothing had been undone. The house spoke only in echoes. Wooden floors creaked beneath careful footsteps. Windows sighed with the weight of heat and time, and walls, thick with clay and lime, held secrets like lungs hold smoke. Joanna moved through its corridors in silence, not because she wanted to, but because she had learned. In this house, sound belonged to the masters. Still, the walls heard her. Every breath, every pause, every tremor in her step since she buried the shirt. They remembered her just as they remembered her mother, who had once sung while scrubbing the same floors, until she stopped and disappeared. Joanna dusted the parlor shelves with slow, circular motions. Above her, portraits loomed, ancestors in stiff suits and lace, pale faces, sharp eyes. She often wondered what they thought of her brown fingers polishing their frames. Sometimes she imagined they whispered when she passed. But today, she was the one whispering inwardly, furiously. Gabriel was dead. She hadn't heard it confirmed yet, but she didn't need to. Lucas's mocking tone, the quiet way Dona Rosa avoided the details, the deliberate absence of names, all of it saying the same truth. And now, another man sat in jail, accused. Another brown body, disposable. The broom clattered in her hand. She steadied it. The day was long. At noon, the sun dragged its weight across the courtyard. Joanna knelt beside the laundry basin, scrubbing linen with soap that bit her fingers raw. Her back ached. Her thoughts burned. She remembered how Gabriel had smiled when he passed, not at her, but near her. Smiles were rare things between them, shared like rain in a dry month. "Joanna," whispered a voice beside the fence. She flinched, startled. It was Tia Salva, an old washerwoman who worked downriver. Her back was bent like the willow trees, her face a map of sun and smoke. "You heard?" Salva asked, glancing over her shoulder. Joanna nodded. A shallow motion. "They say it was Cicero who did it. Got caught with blood on his boots. But I seen Cicero that night, far from the ravine." Joanna swallowed. "You tell the police?" Salva laughed, bitter and breathless. "You think they listened to me, girl?" The words sat like stones between them. Joanna stared into the basin. The soap bubbles shimmered for a moment, then popped. Salva leaned in closer. "That Gabriel boy, he didn't know how to lower his eyes. That was his mistake. Same as your mama's." Joanna's hands froze. Salva straightened. "I saw her the morning she vanished, you know, standing by the gate like something was chasing her shadow." Joanna said nothing. She never asked about her mother. Not anymore. The answers were always worse than the questions. The old woman spat into the dust. Some names they try to erase. But clay remembers. Blood don't lie. She walked away, limping slightly, her head high. Later that night, Joanna sat in the back pantry folding towels. The house had gone still. She heard the floor above creak, Lucas's room. Then laughter, low and sharp. A woman's giggle followed. One of the maids, probably, or someone brought in from the town. Joanna folded the last towel, stood, and stared at the small mirror nailed to the pantry wall. Her face looked strange tonight. Older, or maybe just clearer. She whispered her mother's name, Umoja. The name sounded wrong in her mouth, sacred and misplaced. That night, in her cot beneath the servants' stairs, Joanna dreamed of her mother for the first time in years. Not her face, just her hands, brushing ash from her skin, whispering words in Yoruba that Joanna could no longer understand. When she woke, her palms were black with soot. And the house, silent and indifferent, kept listening. They found him face down in the ravine. Two boys looking for birds stumbled across the body early in the morning. By mid-afternoon, the news had spread like spilled kerosene. Not Gabriel's name, that part was buried, but the story, retold in half-sentences, muffled tones, always ending with, "He was stealing." That's what happens. Joanna heard it from the cook, who heard it from the butcher's wife, who'd heard it from the schoolteacher, who claimed she saw the sheriff ride out before breakfast with a rope in hand and no question in his eyes. By the time the sun reached its highest point, it wasn't Gabriel anymore. Just the boy. The body. That one. Senor Aguilar barely looked up from his cigar when the news reached their veranda. "Animals don't learn," he muttered, flicking ash into a glass dish. Lucas snorted. He ran right into the riverbank. Not smart. Probably thought he could outrun dogs. Marcos was quiet, as always. His fork pushed food in slow circles. His eyes flicked toward Joanna, then away. Joanna stood behind them, still, invisible. Later that day, as she swept the hallway, she heard the help whispering in the scullery. They spoke in sharp bursts, sentences bitten off in fear. Gabriel had worked for the Aguilars once, not in the house, but in the fields, sorting tobacco leaves. They all knew him. No one said his name now, saying it might bring notice. Or worse, guilt. Joanna moved past them and out into the yard. She needed air. Clay cracked underfoot, dry from too many weeks without rain. Near the oven, flies still buzzed faintly. The ash had settled. No trace showed. She stared at the spot. Her breath slowed. If she dug again, she could touch the cloth. The proof. The truth no one wanted. Instead, she walked to the fence line and leaned her elbows against the old cedar. From here, she could see the ridge beyond the ravine, where the vultures circled, just three, lazily drifting. Waiting. She thought of Gabriel's mother, who lived across the fields. A woman with clouded eyes and hands too calloused to hold anything gently anymore. Had she been told? Had anyone thought to knock on her door? No. In this place, grief belonged only to the white. When Joanna returned to the kitchen, Marcos sat alone at the table, twisting a linen napkin in his fingers. He was tin quiet, skittish, more eyes than voice. He looked up as she passed. "Joanna," he whispered. She paused. His lips moved, hesitant. Did he do it? The man they took. She looked at him, really looked, pale-skinned, soft-palmed, shaped by a world that bent before his feet. And yet, his voice trembled like a child afraid of his own shadow. She didn't answer, only returned to her work. That night, Joanna couldn't sleep. Her cot felt too narrow, the air too thick. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gabriel's shirt, soaked, stiff, silent. Her body remembered the feel of the ash. Her palms itched. She rose before dawn, crept out barefoot, and walked to the fields. In the east, the sky burned with a thin orange light. Dew clung to the grass. The clay was softer now, cooler, but still it clung. At the fence post near the ravine, she found a scrap of paper wedged into the wire, a church bulletin. On it, someone had written in charcoal. Buried without name. No priest. No prayer. Joanna folded the paper slowly, then tore it into pieces. She didn't know who wrote it, but she knew it wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be carried. Like weight. Like memory. She knelt, pressed her hand to the dirt, and whispered his name. Gabriel. Not loud. Just once. It was enough to make the wind stir. The oven waited like a sleeping mouth, its belly warm even when cold. Joanna approached it again 3 days after Gabriel's burial. A burial with no grave. No stone. No name. The town had returned to its rhythm. Wagons creaked along the road. The market bustled with gossip salted in ignorance. The Aguilars began planning a party, Lucas's birthday, or some such excuse to drink and show off wealth. Men would come in boots that crushed ants and rumors alike. Women would come dressed in silk sewn by the same hands they refused to meet at eye level. And Joanna, she would serve, smile, disappear. She knelt by the oven before dawn, when the house was still asleep. She dug through the warm ash. Her hands no longer trembled. Beneath the gray, she found the shirt. It hadn't moved. No one else had touched it. The fabric crackled as she lifted it. The blood had dried into jagged brown blooms. One sleeve was torn. She traced the rip with a finger and saw it again. A knife, a struggle, Gabriel's body on red earth, heart racing to stillness. She wrapped the shirt in an old kerchief, the one her mother once used to strain cassava pulp. She tied the corners tight, tucked it into the folds of her skirt, and returned to the house. Inside, The air smelled of lemons and furniture polish. Dona Rosa had ordered the house presentable, which meant Joanna had to make it so. By noon, sweat clung to her spine, her fingers pruned from water. She moved from room to room like a shadow. Lucas passed her in the hall, his shirt unbuttoned, belt slung low. He reeked of tobacco and arrogance. "You missed a spot on the mirror," he muttered, not even looking at her. She didn't answer. His hand brushed her shoulder as he passed, not by accident. The shirt in her skirt pocket felt like fire. Her legs stiffened. That night, while the Aguilars dined with guests under the veranda, Joanna stood in the pantry, back against the wall. The muffled laughter from outside made the walls pulse. A phonograph played a waltz. Silverware scraped china. She pressed her hands against the fabric of her skirt, feeling the shirt bundled beneath. She should burn it, and forget. Let the ash mingle with the rest of the world's cruelties. Let silence keep her safe. But then she thought of Cicero, the man the sheriff had taken. A kind man, soft-voiced, Gabriel's uncle. She had seen his wife walk past the estate that morning, carrying a basket on her head, spine straight despite the ache in her eyes. No one had looked at her. Joanna had. She left the pantry and crept through the back door, shirt still bundled, steps quiet as snowfall. At the back gate, she waited until the cook's boy ran past with water buckets. Then she slipped out, took the side path behind the stable, and followed it toward the outskirts where the sharecropper families lived, past the mango trees, past the field where the soil was still dark from recent rain. She found Cicero's wife, Dona Bettina, crouched by a water barrel. Her face was thin, lips cracked. When she saw Joanna, she didn't smile, just nodded once. Joanna knelt and set the wrapped shirt into Bettina's laundry basket. No words. None were needed. Bettina looked down. Her fingers trembled as they brushed the kerchief. Then she closed the basket, placed her hand over the lid, and held it there, firm, unmoving. Joanna turned and walked back. The moon was rising now. The oven was behind her. The house glowed ahead, bright and blind. She did not know what would come next. But the shirt was no longer hers to carry. Laughter carries in a house like smoke in a storm, rising, curling, finding the smallest cracks to slip through. And Lucas Aguilar's laughter didn't echo. It pierced. Joanna heard it first from the hallway. Late evening. Dinner had stretched long past dusk, the guests too full of wine and sugar to leave. The house was bloated with voices, but it stood out, loud, sharp, the kind that didn't need to be clever to be cruel. She paused outside the dining room, tray in hand, when it came. "I told him," Lucas barked, "he could run, but the ravine's hungry this year." More laughter. Male. White. Flat with amusement. Someone clapped him on the back. "You didn't. Just scared him," Lucas said. He tripped over his own damn feet. Dog did the rest. The table exploded in chuckles. Forks clinked. Glasses clapped. Joanna stood still. The tray felt heavy, though it held only plates. Her legs moved without command, entering the room like a ghost dressed in cotton. They didn't stop laughing when they saw her. They never did. She wasn't there to be seen, only to serve. Lucas grinned at her as she cleared the plates. His eyes met hers briefly. No shame, no guilt, only the smug shine of a boy who'd never paid for anything. Joanna did not blink. When she turned back to the kitchen, her stomach burned. Later, she sliced yuca on the wooden block. The knife moved mechanically. Each cut landed hard. Behind her, the cook spoke in low tones to the gardener's son. "They won't open no case. Bettina's got the shirt, but the sheriff's already been paid." Joanna kept slicing. "She's going to the priest," he said. "Tomorrow." The knife paused. A beat too long. That night, Joanna lay on her cot and stared at the wooden slats above. Rain tapped at the roof, gentle, uneven, not enough to cool the air. She remembered Lucas's laugh. How close it had sounded. How free. She remembered Gabriel's crooked smile, the red thread at his cuffs. Her mother's fingers tying knots in silence. She pressed her hands flat against her stomach. It ached. Not from hunger. From knowing. In the morning, she woke early. The rain had passed, leaving the air thick with damp clay and the scent of rotting mangoes. The fields glistened in the light. Dona Rosa sent her to polish the family silver. The house needed to sparkle, she said, new guests arriving by Sunday. Joanna worked in the dining room, cloth in hand, while the empty chairs loomed like judges. Lucas entered around noon, yawning, hair tousled. "Tell Rosa the wine was shit," he mumbled, grabbing a banana from the table. Joanna didn't look at him. He paused in the doorway. "You're quiet." She didn't speak. He stepped closer, peeling the fruit, watching her. "You didn't like the story, did you?" he asked, voice low. Joanna's hands froze on the knife handle she was polishing. Lucas leaned closer. "I didn't kill him. Not really. Boy just ran. Got stupid." Joanna turned, slowly, cloth in hand. Her eyes met his. "You pushed him," she said. A beat passed. He laughed again, softer this time. "You talk too much now." She turned back to the silver, said nothing else. He walked away, but she knew, and so did the house. The drum hadn't sounded in weeks. Joanna remembered its rhythm, deep, low, steady, from the backfields during solstice, from weddings where no bride dared wear shoes, from wakes that lasted through the dark until breath returned to the bones of the living. But now silence. Not grief, not peace, just silence. She walked into town under a sky thick with low-hanging clouds. Rain threatened, but never came. Her steps took her past the chapel, where the priest burned incense alone, muttering to saints with eyes made of painted glass. Past the jail, where Cicero sat behind bars for a murder no one dared doubt publicly. And past the bakery, where women whispered and boys kicked dust over questions. She found Tia Salva at her basin behind the church, washing clothes, always washing, wrists swollen, eyes clear. Joanna knelt beside her. The older woman did not look up. "He laughed," Joanna said. "He told them." He joked. The water slapped rhythmically against the tub. "I gave her the shirt." Salva's hands didn't pause. "They won't do anything." "No," Salva murmured. "They won't." Joanna looked down. Her hands twisted in her lap. "I thought if I brought it, if she took it to the priest." Salva finally turned to her. Her eyes were the color of dark honey, veined with smoke and history. "The priest?" she asked. "The priest has a bed lined with Aguilar coin." Joanna looked away. Salva sighed. "You brought truth. That's not what they want. They want forgetting." Joanna's voice broke. "So I let him die for nothing?" "No." Salva reached into the water and lifted a sodden cloth, letting it drip. "You did what your mother couldn't." Joanna blinked. "What do you mean?" She saw something too. Long ago. Someone else's blood. And she stayed quiet. Until they made her disappear. Joanna felt the words punch into her chest like iron. "You said she ran." "I said she looked chaste." "Girl, we're always running. Question is, do we ever stop?" Joanna stood, her legs trembling. Salva nodded toward the forest. "Old man Januario's still got his drum. Hasn't played it since the soldiers burned his hut. But maybe it's time." Joanna looked at the path. She hadn't gone up that way since she was a child. The trail curved past old trees, knotted and bent, and ended in a clearing where no maps dared stretch. That night, she went. The forest swallowed her quickly, vines thick, insects loud, the sky almost gone. But the path remembered. Her feet found it in the dark. She reached the clearing and found Januario's shack still standing, crooked, silent, alive. The old man sat on a stool with no legs left. His beard spilled over his chest like ash. He didn't rise when she appeared. "I brought truth," she said. He nodded. She showed him her palms, still blackened by ash from days ago. He stood slowly, walked to the back, returned with the drum. It was old, cowhide cracked, wood warped, but when he placed it in her hands, it felt warm. "Not all drums speak," he whispered. "Some just listen, until someone's ready." Joanna held it. Rain finally came, soft at first, then stronger. The drum stayed dry beneath her arms. She did not beat it that night, but she carried it back to the house. The oven watched her return. The silence in the walls grew tighter, and somewhere, beneath the red soil, the memory of a name stirred. Whispers are the seeds of uprisings. They root in silence, fed by fear, watered with rage. And they had begun. Not loudly. Not yet. But they slid between door frames and under porches. Between the cracked lips of women at the water pump. In the tight nods of men on their way to chapel, hats pulled low. In the trembling prayers of Bettina, Cicero's wife, as she clutched the blood-stiffened shirt with both hands and refused to let it vanish. The priest had turned her away. She showed him the shirt. He folded his hands and said, "We cannot intervene in civil matters." She begged. He shook his head, then prayed, not for Gabriel, but for order. Bettina didn't return to the chapel. Instead, she sat on the steps of the sheriff's office each morning. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She just sat, with the shirt folded on her lap. Her silence grew heavier with each sunrise. By the third day, others joined. A seamstress with one eye and two missing sons. A schoolteacher too brown for her post. A boy who once shared bread with Gabriel and still wore his friend's cast-off shoes. They came one by one. Whispers turned to presents. Joanna watched from the estate's edge, drum wrapped in a linen cloth, pressed to her side like a child. She hadn't played it yet. Not truly. Just brushed her fingertips across its surface at night, letting it remember her mother's voice, her grandmother's rhythm, the cadence of truths too dangerous to speak aloud. Lucas noticed the shift first. He came into the kitchen with a grin tighter than usual. People are stirring. Father says we'll need to remind them who keeps this town fed. Joanna said nothing. They're saying the wrong man's in jail. His smile curled. But you knew that, didn't you? She kept her eyes on the pot. Lucas stepped closer, leaned near. You think they'll protect you? Her hands stilled. They don't love you, he whispered. You'll fall with them. That night, Joanna lit a small candle and placed it beneath the mango tree. She closed her eyes. The drum sat in her lap. She beat it once. The sound was soft, barely audible beyond the leaves. But the trees shifted. A dog barked in the distance. Something changed. The next day, Tia Salva appeared in the market square with a bell on her belt. She didn't ring it. Just let it jingle faintly with each step. Joanna heard later that Cicero's case was being reopened. The sheriff had refused at first. Then someone leaked a copy of the arrest record, incomplete, and signed, suspicious. Bettina didn't leave the office steps. A reporter from Porto Alegre arrived. The mayor was overheard calling the Aguilars inconvenient. Something was unraveling. That night, Joanna stood behind the oven, eyes closed, drum in hand. She whispered, Gabriel. Then, Yamoja. Then, me. She beat the drum once more. The house didn't crumble. But in her sleep, Marcos cried for the first time in years. The house let her go without a word. No raised voice. No accusations. No farewells. Just a folded envelope with her final week's pay short, of course, left on the kitchen table beside a bruised pear. Joanna picked it up with steady fingers. Her apron was already folded. Her cot, already stripped. Her silence, intact. She walked through the courtyard with the drum on her back, head held higher than it had ever dared. The oven didn't smoke that morning. The clay bricks were cold. Lucas didn't appear. But Marcos watched her from the upstairs window, small fingers pressed against the glass. His face unreadable. The road stretched out in red behind her. She didn't look back. Cicero was released the next day. Charges dropped, no apology given. The sheriff called it a procedural confusion. The Aguilars did not attend the hearing. Bettina stood with her husband at the town square, holding the shirt like a flag. The priest kept his silence. So did the mayor. But the people, they didn't. Not anymore. The whispers had grown legs, grown names, grown eyes that watched and voices that asked questions. Gabriel's name was spoken in the chapel that Sunday. Quietly, but aloud. A candle was lit. Not by the priest. By Salva. She lit it and walked away, leaving it to burn beside the altar of saints who had never known his name. Joanna walked beyond the town's edge, where fences gave way to wild bush and the earth stopped obeying old hands. She followed the trail past Januario's shack, past the stream where her mother once washed roots, past the ridge where vultures no longer circled. She reached a field of red clay dampened by last week's rain, the earth soft enough to remember steps. There, she stopped. She unwrapped the drum, placed it in the center of the field, sat beside it, and played. Not loud, not desperate. A rhythm steady as breath. Each beat a name. Each pause, a body lost. Each crescendo, a memory pulled from the soil. Her hands moved with purpose, not pain. Joanna played until her fingers ached, until dusk pulled the sky over her shoulders, until the earth itself seemed to echo her rhythm. When she rose, her skirt was soaked at the hem. Her feet stained red, not from shame, from truth. The red soil had always remembered. Now it would speak. And Joanna, once silenced, once invisible, had given it back its voice.